freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to Gun Freedom Radio. I am your host, Cheryl Todd, and I am here today to interview and get to know a little bit better Adam Wilson. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Adam and I have known each other through the Facebook, right? And the webs. And it's such a powerful tool to get to meet people that you might otherwise never have had a chance to know. And I'm so fortunate and so blessed to have met him. Now, Adam was once a homeless high school dropout. Now, wait till you hear how accomplished this person has become in his life. From a start like that into his adult life, he is now a highly decorated 14-year law enforcement veteran who was recognized in 2018 by the National Association of Police Organizations that sponsors the annual Top Cop Awards for producing the top investigation in North Carolina. And in addition to all of this, he is also the author of a book, Tactical Reload: Strategy Shifts for Emerging Leaders in Law Enforcement. Holy cow, that is quite the journey, Adam.
It has been. You're right.
Hold up that book for us to see, for the people watching the video, the people listening online.
Shameless plug here. So you can find
plug.
The shield, the red and black and white. That's kind of my colors there. But yeah, that's it. Tactical Reload.
So I have not had a chance to read it yet, but I did order my copy yesterday from Amazon.com. By the way, everybody can get their own copy. I saw that there's an Audible version. Did you voice that?
I did. Yeah.
That is my favorite way to read books these days. So I'm probably going to have you in
Mine too. It's so hard. Doing an audio, I thought I could read. Before, I thought I was a good reader before I got in the booth and had to read into a microphone for several hours at a time. Your lips go numb because you're reading out loud. You're not reading in your brain. And it is much harder than I ever thought it was going to take.
I completely hear you and feel you because I usually write most of the copy for this show, and then I hand the paper off to my co-host, my husband, Dan. And brilliant man, he's fine until he's trying to read something out loud. And then it's like foreign.
Yes. I felt bad for the engineer that had to go and clean up all the mistakes. It was terrible. But I did. And, it was a lot of fun. I wanted that experience. And the publishers, if anybody out there is ever interested in writing a book, they really want the author, if they can, to do the reading because they know where to put those inflections and where to put the emotion behind the words at.
And as a consumer, I like to hear the voice of the person who wrote it and experienced the thing. So that's two bucket list things for me. I still want to write, and I want to, if I don't voice my own book, I want to voice a book. I think that
you got I think you do fantastic at it. I think you got a great voice, very articulate, and not to get. This may sound kind of morbid to some people, but I'm in a profession where things happen to people and people lose their lives, and so I thought if I did an audiobook, it would be a neat thing to leave behind if something ever happened to me, to my family and friends, that they could go back and play me in the car.
Absolutely, I love that actually, but it's going to be a long time from now before that happens.
Knocking on wood.
Right. So let's kind of rewind a little bit and talk about, well, where did this book come from? Where did the idea for it come from? What is it really about?
Sure. And that has been the $1 million questions, is why did I write the book? And I really do wish I wish I had a singular answer that just blew people's hair back and it was just a very easy answer. But in all honesty, it's kind of multifaceted. And so I found myself talking to a lot of the rookies, a lot of our new hires. I'm a police officer. And so I was given pieces of advice and things I wish people would have told me at the start of my career. And so, but I felt like I always left something out. So I'd go home and I started to jot stuff down to be like, hey, I need to remember that. That was gold. And so I would write stuff down, and it became more and more, and it kind of became therapeutic in a way. And the more I wrote, the more I felt like I maybe had something. And so it was that angle. And I talk a lot about influence and positive influence and the effects it has on your family and friends, and how negativity can creep into your life and just becomes a cancer. And I thought, this would be a good way to bring some positive influence to a profession that just gets beaten down all the time. Yeah. And so there was that aspect. And then, to be honest, completely honest, there was a selfish aspect too, that I wanted to write a book and achieve a goal. And it was one of those bucket list things. I thought, you know what, I'm going to put it out there. And I can honestly say it's probably been the most vulnerable thing that I've ever done, because it's one thing to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to write a book, but you actually put your thoughts on paper and your ideas on paper is very scary, because you don't know how it's going to be received. You don't know if it's going to be a joke. You don't know what people are going to think. But Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, a beloved person across the country in law enforcement. I know he's been on the show. I asked him if he'd be interested in writing the foreword. And just like any professional, he's not going to stamp his name on something until he reads it. Well, he reads it and he calls me. And he's like, hey, man, I think you got something. So I was like, wow. Okay. So if Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is saying that, hey, it's legitimate, then I'm going to take his word for it. But he was one of the first ones outside of my family and friends. My mom's going to tell me anything I write is good, right? Sure. But when Dave Grossman says it's good and that he will write the foreword, which he ended up doing, that's when I thought, well, I have something here. And so selfishness, influence, and it kind of, I wanted to get those pieces of advice out there, especially to the new guys and girls out there getting into law enforcement. That was kind of my trifecta of that all came together to really push me to write the book.
That's awesome. So I understand that feeling of, vulnerability and like exposing parts of yourself in the written word, and now it's forever. Like it's out there, right?
It's out there. Yeah.
So how much of your personal life, the fact that you were a high school dropout, homeless for a while, how much of that is actually like written in the book, and how much of that is just lessons you learned from being in, going through the journey that you went through?
Sure. I like using my story as it's not that I don't have an original story. I guess everybody kind of does. But, it's a very kind of pick you up by the bootstraps type of story, completely American, right? Millions of people have had stories like mine where, there's a level of perseverance that they had to overcome. And so, but I thought for people interested in being police, I think there is a misperception a lot of times that you have to have a squeaky clean background. You have to have perfect credit. You have to have had, no past with any kind of, road humps in it. And it's just not the case. And so I wanted to use my story to show like, hey, look, if I can do it, then you can do it. Now, some may have an easier time than others, but with hard work works. If you're willing to put in the time every day and work hard, you can literally do anything that you want to do. We live in the greatest country in the world. I honestly, God, believe that is full of opportunities. It just depends on how hard you want to work to take advantage of those opportunities. So no matter what your place is, that you can always overcome it and then still achieve a goal. Now granted, in the police world, you can't come in with, out of prison and with a bunch of felonies, snorting cocaine, saying I want to be a cop. That's not going to work. But, you don't have to have some graduate degree. You don't have to have, if you've been suspended, if you've been in trouble before, if you've gotten some tickets, if you've gotten a DWI, a certain amount of years back, those things, to me, I like seeing people come into the profession that has been punched in the face, eaten it, and then gotten back after it. What I don't like, and I see it a lot, I'm not gonna say I don't like it because there's nothing wrong with it, but one trend I see a lot is kids get out of high school, they've had a perfect life, got in a car at 16, went to the prom, done all the things kids are supposed to do, went to a 4-year university, graduated, and now they want to be the police. And that's fine. But they've never really experienced that much life yet. And you're giving them a boatload of responsibility. That's one reason I love getting military guys in is because, hey, they have done, not that graduating college isn't a significant accomplishment. It certainly takes some grit and some fortitude, but being in the military really gives you discipline. You learn rank structure, responsibility, and I think those things are important. And so a lot of times, but you get these kids come in, and all of a sudden they got that badge on, and it's they think they're big time, they think they're tough, and so sometimes you got to break it down for the kids that you're not a tough guy. You've had a great life. You're getting ready to go into these neighborhoods where some of these people don't know anything but severe poverty. They're fighting every day. They're selling drugs. All they know is violence. They don't have anything else. And some of these kids have never been punched in the face before. Now they're the police, and they got to go deal with these people. And so my story, kind of circling back around, my story was just to show, like, hey, look, these are the issues that I had growing up. I didn't have a perfect background, and all of it was self-induced. My parents were great, but it was stupid Adam being young, trying to be too independent. And, I was able to overcome it. So if I can do it, you can do it too.
That's awesome. That's so important. All of those things, being able to understand the world from another person's perspective and experience. I feel like we're losing that. Like you would think in the world where, you can peek into people's lives on social media 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You would think that we would start to be better able to, wear someone else's shoes, think about someone else's life. Feels like we're falling farther away from that for whatever reasons. And that would be for a sociologist to probably help break it down. But I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you saying is that, that whole having been punched in the face yourself, it gives you some idea. If somebody is selling drugs, it may not be because they're just they want to be part of this underworld. It's their only option, maybe in their minds, maybe not in reality, but in their minds. That's their only option to keep food on the table for their family. So that's really interesting. And so you talk about coming into law enforcement without necessarily the squeakiest, cleanest, background with the good credit and all that stuff. You also had a physical challenge to coming in on the force that not everybody would have had. So talk to us about what that was.
So aside from being 5'6", and being a challenge in itself with height, so I grew up, whenever I was a baby, I grew up with only having one kidney. So whenever I was born, there was a blockage in my kidney and in my bladder, and they had to remove a kidney and part of my bladder. Now, in 1982, which is when I was born, renal care wasn't where it's at today. Now they potentially could have saved the kidney and, worked their magic and everything would have been fine. But back then, they really didn't know how sick I was or wasn't. And so everything to me was through a lens of caution. The doctor told my parents that he was nervous about me riding a bike because if I fell off and fell on a rock, I could lose the other kidney.
Mm.
So I was never able to play sports growing up, which I think is super, super important for kids, especially learning those life lessons and building character and discipline and having somebody be hard on you. I didn't have that. But I wanted that so bad. Not necessarily the discipline, but I just wanted to be a part of a team and play sports and be a normal kid. And I never had that growing up. And so, and honestly, the first time I was ever really on a team, aside from being a part of the team of a at Chili's or at the police department, my first team was the SWAT team at the police department. And so I don't know if I looked at it, a little more, gratifying than some of the other guys did that maybe grew up playing basketball and football. I feel like all those guys on the team are all alpha male type personalities that played high school football and wrestled and played sports in college, and that's all they kind of knew. But then there was me, the little 5'6" kid with one kidney, trying to shoot a gun. And so here I came. But that was probably my first experience, and that just kind of that just built more on the passion for law enforcement in general, because that kind of quenched that thirst for me in a way. And so that made me, so as soon as I was on the team, it was, man, I loved it. Still love it. I'm not on the team anymore. Unfortunately, I had to come off once I got promoted. There was just too many sergeants on the team. And so just a completely logistical thing. And now I'm on another team. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it was something that was really important to me for a while.
Wow. So when I'm hearing your story and I'm thinking about, kind of where you brought yourself through, I love stories like that. Those whole bootstrap stories, like you were saying, kind of that can-do spirit and not letting your past determine your future.
100%.
Sort of thing. I just love those kinds of stories. And I'm hearing also like resourcefulness, because, when you were homeless, what did that look like for you? Were you like on the sidewalk? Like,
that's what a lot of people think when they hear that. When you first hear, homeless, you think, well, man, you must have been sleeping under a, sleeping next to a trash can under a bridge somewhere. Yeah. And that's not what it was. I left home fairly early, and I was just kind of couch to couch for a while. People would take me in, empathetic parents or whoever would just let me come sleep on the couch a few nights, and then I'd move along. The famous trailer story is we move into a trailer, me and a couple guys that were kind of in the same predicament that I was in, but the trailer didn't have any power, didn't have any furniture, and then it didn't even have working sewage. Everything just ran into the yard. And so completely disgusting. I think we even had a party there for God. It's so
stupid. Of course you did, right?
Like, it wasn't nothing to break, right? Right. Use the bathroom, go in the yard. And so, but we ended up getting a lamp. I remember that, and it was hooked up to a generator. And I remember just having a pile of clothes on the floor and just kind of use that as a bed sometimes. And it probably makes my family cringe now thinking about it, and I was too prideful and stupid to just, tuck my tail and go back home. So I just kind of kept jumping around from place to place. And as bad as it sounds, though, like I don't think that I would change anything. Mm-hmm. Because I think going through those things made me so resilient now, mm-hmm. that like there's not a lot that you can throw at me that I haven't been through, or it's not as bad as it's been. Mm. I remember working so I would work at this movie theater during this time, and we had to wear these little bow ties and vests, and I was an usher and making popcorn. But I remember, the big drinks that would come in these huge bags, and I remember the leftover popcorn I would take and just fill it up, and I would tie it off, and I would march out to the car, and that would be my dinner for that night back at the trailer with no power or furniture. And so it sounds terrible, and I swore forever that I would never eat freaking popcorn again. I was like, I will never. I am so sick of popcorn, but I did eventually go back to eating popcorn. I now have my Sunday night ritual with my HBO shows with popcorn as a snack. But I think about those times, I'm thinking, there's no way I would ever trade that, because the lessons I learned in those moments taught me so much that I know now. And because what it did really, and I talk a lot about influence, but the chip that it put on my shoulder to be successful, that is what sparked my work ethic at its core. There was a couple moments whenever I was younger in seventh grade, and I'll tell you a quick story. And I'm actually trying to sell this as a TED talk about influence. But in seventh grade, I remember going into an auditorium, and it was a basic auditorium. You got the old wooden seats at a junior high, middle school, and you got the old tattered curtains and the old stage for theater stuff. And they put us all in 3 different groups. One group was college prep. Those were the popular kids that were going to be going straight to a college. Then this group in the middle were the college tech prep. These were the kids that were going to go to a 2-year school out of high school. Maybe they go to a college. Maybe they go into the workforce. But that was the kids that were kind of middle of the road grades, A-B students, but not like the really smart kids. And then there was my group. And my group was the trade group. And I remember them telling us that college probably isn't your thing. You need to learn a trade or some type of skill that you're going to be able to work with as an adult. And they were telling us this, like, hey, you need to start doing this now, because you're going to graduate high school soon, and then you're going to be basically working the rest of your life. And I remember looking around thinking, well, if that's the case, the only reason most of these kids are going to continue to do well in school is to eventually go to college. So why am I even bothering? I remember, like, and then they told me that they were not going to pass me along to the 8th grade, 9th grade, that I was going to go regardless. I don't know if it was a child left behind thing at the time, but I'm moving on. And so I was just like, well, what the hell? Like, what am I even, like, I'm not wasting my time with homework. And that kind of compounded year after year. And, moving on to the 11th grade, that's when I officially quit school and became a high school dropout. And why that's important is, well, one is the level of influence that it had on the trajectory of my life at that time. Yeah. Because here's an educator that I'm told my whole life to trust, listen to, they know best. Why would a 13-year-old not listen to this person that's telling me you're not going to go to college? Mm-hmm. You need to go find you a meal job somewhere, which is a very feasible thing at the time, because my hometown in Gastonia, North Carolina, is a very textile-rich environment. Mm-hmm. There's mills all over the place. And so I just kind of quit trying. It wasn't that I was stupid. It was just like, well, why waste my time? Obviously, I'm not going to college. This person said so.
Yeah.
And then in the 11th grade, I remember they said, look, you're going to have to quit school. And I was like, oh, hey, give me the paperwork. Because I had missed so many days. They said, if you don't quit, you're going to take all Fs and you will never, ever graduate with your class. So I was like, okay, so let's go back to this dropping out thing. How is that going to help? They said, well, you can take incompletes if you drop out, and then you can go to summer school and do something. It'll be a miracle, but you would be able to come back and graduate with your class. Mm-hmm. And that time I was like, I'm not going to say I was one of the popular kids, but I hung out with a lot of the kids that were considered popular, and I didn't want to be a high school dropout, but I was like, well, hey, this person knows best, right? Professional educator. So I dropped out. And so what I had to do, and this was probably the first time I was ever really challenged, is I went to summer school that year and got a couple credits. My senior year of high school, I would go to high school during the day, and then I would go to Gaston College, which is our local community college, from 5 to 9 every day for the entire year. And it was tough. That was a hard year. But all that did was get me back to 0.
Yeah.
And so, because I was in the negatives, right. So it got me back to 0. But at that point, I was considered a dropout. You know, I was considered the dumb kid, the screw up, you know, and that was kind of like the 7th grade to that was two of the most influential things that happened to me. And as far as influence, and, but I still wouldn't trade it, because that really put a chip on my shoulder, because I wanted to prove to people that no, I'm not that person. And the older, more mature I got, I just found myself working harder and harder and harder to show them that I'm not a screw up. Because I remember I went to NC State for a little while, and I didn't get enough financial aid to stay. So I had to come back home. I was working a full-time job up there, but I still couldn't afford the tuition and everything. And I really didn't have a support system back home to just give me money. So I come back home, and I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I was just like, yeah, I just didn't have the money to stay. And they were like, yeah, okay. Like, sure you didn't. You flunked out. And I was like, no, actually I was doing pretty good. But that was my perception.
Yeah.
You know, like, of course Adam quits state, or what, he quits everything.
Right.
And so like that eat at me. And I was, you know, and that was one of the reasons I was going to try to go for my PhD, but that's an expensive point to prove, and so I was just like, well, and, but yeah. And so all that kind of, and at that moment I put in my head, if feasibly, I will never, ever quit anything else I ever start again. And even with the book, even when I was like, I don't feel like writing, that in the back of my mind was like, nope, push forward, always push forward. Even slow progress is still progress.
Absolutely.
And so hard work works.
I love that. Your parents, I'd love to talk to them, because there was probably times that they were like, what did we do? And what, he's living in they're peeing in the yard, right?
Yeah,
like
they had
now, if they could just, if they were had that crystal ball, they could have just seen, no, all of this is actually going to make him.
It's going to work out in the end. And I was very nervous about that too, about writing the book, because I didn't want to paint anybody in a bad light, because they didn't know what the hell they got themselves into whenever I came along. They really didn't.
Parenthood.
It was parenthood.
Not just a job, it's an adventure.
Right, because I was not scared to be like, I'm out. I'll go wherever. And at some point, like, you can only do so much as a parent. And even looking back now, I think, man, they would have been completely justified in just knocking me out several times. But they were great parents. It's just, I was just such a knucklehead, and God has plans for everybody. Yeah. And I don't know if that was just part of his plan. Yeah. I feel bad for them if it was my plan to put them through torment. But it's great now, and I did my best not to try to paint them in a bad light in the book, and I really hope I didn't. I just felt like that story had a little bit of value, and maybe there's somebody else in a similar situation out there like myself that thinks maybe maybe I can, after hearing that, maybe I can be a cop, or maybe I can be a fireman.
And are you a parent now?
No, just 2 rescue dogs and a rescue cat.
So your parents were probably, spending all their time just praying that you would be a parent at some point.
I'm sure. I know what I did. And if it was going to come, like, if I have a kid now, it would be the devil reincarnated probably. And I don't know if I can deal with that. And so, but yeah, no, me and my wife, we decided that we're not going to have kids right now. And again, completely selfish reasons.
Yeah.
And, I mean, honestly, we like getting up when we want. We like doing what we want to do. And we're godparents to several kids that we love. And, it's not that, and I always feel bad saying that, but because if it happened, that'd be great, but it's just not something that we want to do right now. Maybe in the future we might. And everybody tells me, it's great, when they're yours, it's great. And it's wonderful. And I'm just like, look, you've slept 3 hours this week. That sounds terrible. You're just saying that because you have to say that now.
Misery loves company. Okay.
And I'm kidding, but so one day we might do it, but right now we like doing our own thing, and I got so much other crap going on. I don't know where I'd find the time.
Absolutely. Well, if you ever do, your parents are going to get some popcorn, and they're going to be like this. They're going to be like, let's watch this play out, right?
I guarantee it.
Oh, I love that. Well, one of the things that we talked about off the air, just to kind of put a bow on all of that, is I love that you said that you have found success through failures, and that it's important not to be afraid of embarrassment.
Yes.
That is something that, especially I think with this social media world that we live in, that, you know, in some ways people are embarrassing themselves all over the place because they don't realize that something they post when they're, you know, super emotional about something, really angry or whatever, that can come back to haunt them later in life, if not immediately.
Yeah.
So I don't mean that kind of thing, but where in that social media world, sometimes we want to live these fake lives. We want to always, you know, look like we're constantly happy or constantly, you know, and that there is so much value to yourself and for other people. I mean, your story, it would be a great story. I mean, the Top Cop Award and all that stuff, it's a great story anyway. But then when you get to hear the gritty beginnings, right, that you chose for yourself, right? Like, all of those things, that's the stuff that really touches people, because they do get to come away with, okay, so even at my lowest moment, I have this example in Adam or whoever that they were able to come through it. And I think that that is so important. And I really appreciate you for being so transparent and vulnerable in that way.
And the thing is, really, I knew if I wasn't, I think people come off as being insincere, and you can see through that a lot of times. And so, especially on social media, of course, everybody only posts the good stuff, right? And so everybody wants to seem like their lives are so perfect, and everybody's lives aren't nearly as perfect as they appear to be on social media. But it was really important to me to be honest, because that's kind of one of my leadership principles that I try to teach people and live by myself. And so if I'm not willing to heed my own advice, and actions speak louder than words. So if I'm not willing to do it, why would anybody ever believe me whenever I'm trying to tell them to be authentic and be themselves and don't be this fake person? If I'm coming across as a fake person or writing from a fake perspective, it's just not gonna be received well.
No, absolutely. The best stories are those that take us through the arc of, a struggle of some sort. And a friend asked me about a year ago, somebody that's just really caught fire in the Second Amendment community and really, made some big, huge progress in a short amount of time, but not without, the bumps in the road, asked me, do you think that super successful people knew they were going to be successful all along? And I said, well, I don't know where you would put somebody like me on that spectrum of successful, right. But my personal experience and talking to people who I think are super successful, if someone says that to you, they are lying. They are absolutely lying, because we don't know what bumps are going to come in the road and what obstacles are going to come along. We have an idea, we have a goal, like you said, you had this chip on your shoulder that was, the gas in your engine pushing you forward. So you've got to believe that it's possible to be successful, but the people that are hugely successful, if they are not sharing those parts of their life, I think that's selfish, and I think that they're doing a disservice.
I agree 100%. I was just getting ready to say if they take that approach, they're doing a disservice to everyone else.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. All right. So, you talked about the challenges of the career that you've chosen. Mm-hmm. But in just the last decade and a half, not even quite 2 decades maybe, there have been some really, I would say, from somebody who's not in law enforcement looking into the people in your career field, there are more significant challenges almost every day, it feels like.
Yes.
And you were talking off air about Ferguson. Now, some people might not immediately remember, well, what's Ferguson? What's my memory peg for Ferguson? But you talk about post-Ferguson effects on finding people who want to join your career field.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about all of that.
So Ferguson is probably one of the biggest events that has really changed the landscape across the country, really across the world, for policing. There were several things that happened in Ferguson that, the whole mantra of hands up, don't shoot was all a complete lie. But by the time we're able to come out and say it was a lie, everybody's already moved on to something else. And so the police really, I think, they're an easy target. We're an easy target. And what I mean is people know that they can come on TV, say whatever they want to say, and that typically we're going to take another road. We're not going to respond and get in some kind of, debate or some kind of argument where we're just going back and forth in circles. Commonly, we take the higher road. We take the more, the more mature approach. But when we don't respond to some of that stuff, that's what the perceived truth becomes. And it's all about, and one of the most dangerous things I see is the perspectives that are built off these false narratives. Mm-hmm. So you have this false narrative of the hands up, don't shoot mantra, and it has changed people's perceptions. Hearing those false narratives, no matter what the narrative is, they get these skewed perceptions, and then it alters their behavior moving forward. And so even still today, if we're dealing with somebody, we still hear that hands up, don't shoot. And I'm just like, it's a lie. But by the time we were able to come out and say it's a lie, because there's an investigation that we had to go through, nobody cares anymore because it's already become ingrained and another event's has already started. Mm-hmm. And so I wish we could do better is figuring out a way to respond immediately to certain things, because when we're completely silent, it really solidifies whatever that person is saying. I've seen firsthand, an activist come out and say something about a officer involved shooting or scenario that was complete BS, but then the community gets behind them, and that's the perceived truth. And I'm just like, man, we've got to say something sooner than later, because by the time we're able to say something, everybody's already moved on. Emotions aren't as high anymore. And so we don't do a good job about that. But Ferguson was really it really changed the landscape in terms of like virtue signaling and people wanting to feel like their actions, their crimes were being justified by, because it made it seem like police and still are becoming dehumanized. While and at the same time we're empowering the criminal element,
right?
Because they'll assault police now, and they think it's coming from a place of morality and hey, I'm fighting back against this corrupt system, and it's no. You were selling crack. You were arrested for selling crack. Now you're going to jail. Now you're trying to justify your actions by off this moral high ground that's complete BS. And like, I'm not taking you to jail, for race, gender, for any of these, any of these reasons that you may be spewing out. I'm taking you to jail because you committed a crime. You did this, you did that. And so it's just, whenever people start justifying bad behavior off false narratives, that sets a very dangerous precedent. And people see this, right? And they see the way people are behaving. They see that cops now are getting fired left and right for stuff they put on social media. There was a chief that was not, he hadn't even gotten to the college yet of the police. He was going to be a chief. I can't remember right offhand. He had just gotten hired on at a college as a chief, had not worked a single day yet. He liked a pro-Trump tweet. He didn't say anything. He liked the tweet, immediately suspended because the uproar of the student body. And it's just like, and I see stuff like that. I'm like, well, why would anybody at this point, that's coming out of college or whatever, see this and think, man, I can't wait to go make my $30,000 a year and have to deal with this. Whenever I got, the private sector over here, I can make that, I can double that starting salary and not have to deal with all the stress of everything else I got to deal with. And so the staffing levels have dropped. And one of the things you got to deal with when that happens is, we go from, if a business goes from, 250 applicants to 5, well, those positions are no longer as competitive. So no offense to the officers getting hired now, because we got some phenomenal officers, but if we're not hiring the cream of the crop anymore, you know what I'm saying? So if now the people that wouldn't have even gotten an interview are now getting hired, that maybe not shouldn't even be there in the first place, and it's just it's almost making, sometimes it can make issues even worse. But we got to have bodies. We got to answer calls. We got to go to these wrecks. And so, but Ferguson is really the event that spurned that issue with staffing, where people took a step back and was like, maybe this isn't my cup of tea. And because they saw what happened with social media and the riots in general up there, and how people retaliated over a justified shooting.
So as I was listening to you talk, I was drawing parallels to gun owners, right? So, there are, I'm assuming that you would agree with this. I don't want to assume, I'll ask you. There are people who have worn the uniform and the badge who don't act appropriately.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does that mean that every single person who wears the uniform and the badge is there in order to act inappropriately? No. Right? So do some people misuse the tool, the firearm? Yes. Does that mean that all people that use the tool are bad? No. Does that mean the tool is bad? No. So I'm seeing a parallel there. And then when you talked about how small and how shallow the pool of possible candidates to even be hired is shrinking. And then we pulled somebody out, this captain, don't know him. I didn't even know that story until you told me. But let's suppose that he was an extremely skilled person who was very community minded. Like he was everything that anybody would ever pray someone who chooses that line of work would be. You pulled him out of that career field to be able to serve in the ways that he was going to serve, because maybe he meant to like the thing. Maybe his thumb bumped it as he was scrolling. You don't even know.
That's exactly right.
And so when I talk about that shallowing of the pool of candidates, I think about politics. I think about people that would be amazing public servants who are never going to put themselves through what people go through when they step into the political ring, right? Their life gets, examined upon examined, half-truths and complete lies bubble to the surface and become the narrative. And so what do we get? We only get the people that either, haven't ever lived a real life, so they have this squeaky clean record to go into politics, or we get people who are just so narcissistically driven that they're going to get in there no matter what. And so anyway, I just was drawing those parallels in my mind as I was listening to you talk. And it's like, this isn't giving us the best version of our future. And I don't know what the fix is. Definitely not in this short span of time, but I'm hoping that it causes people to stop and reflect and think about these kinds of things and how reactionary we are right now towards police, towards our people that are trying to, come up in and be public servants and serve their communities in the political realm, and firearms owners. We are being vilified all over the place, every possible way you can, being undermined. And this is not the best path for our nation.
No, I agree. And kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying about the social media. And so what scares me is, if you look at the Kevin Hart situation in Twitter. So they were going back, and it was happening every couple of years. They were going back to like 2011, being offended by a tweet, whether you agree with the tweet or not. That's your business. But
doesn't matter if we agree or not, right? That's free speech. We don't have to agree.
But it would come up every couple of years, and he kept having to apologize for it. And recently, it came up again. He was like, "Look, I've already apologized about this. Like, I cannot apologize anymore." People just kept going back, finding old tweets, and we're getting reoffended. And so I think, man, I've had social media. I've had an Instagram for this many years, or Facebook. I may have put something unknowingly now that at this point, everything's so PC. Maybe somebody's offended. Maybe they're not. And then I get crucified over something I said in 2009, and my career's over. And I guess that's the part that is a little unnerving. Mm-hmm. And I think it sets like I mentioned earlier, a very dangerous precedent. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you should have a statute of limitations on what you said on social media. And I talk about it in the book, is we're in a day and age now. Once you put it out there, once you tweet it, you better be willing to own it, because these escapades of you in college and, doing whatever on spring break, you're posting it on your Facebook. Well, in 20 years, whenever you're running for office or you're trying to, get a job here and they're seeing it, it is what it is. And that's one thing that my generation and the younger generations now, we're going to have to deal with forever. Mm-hmm. And the older generations didn't have to deal with that. And I laugh about it, because I'm thinking, how many, mullets flowing in the wind and a Firebird from the 81 would have been on social media, who, and these people are, chiefs and sheriffs and politicians now. How many of their transgressions whenever they were younger would be, what would they be embarrassed about? And so it's hard to really, so that's what kind of gets on my nerves a little bit whenever some of the previous generations start pointing fingers and mm-hmm. saying how immature we are and this and that. And I'm just thinking, at 17, 18, you probably made some bad decisions too. Mm-hmm. And you would have probably posted them on social media if that was a thing back then. And so, and even, even for parenting, the older generations come from where they could kind of hide their kids from certain things, mm-hmm. but now, no way. Now parents are going to be forced to teach their kids how to look at things through a lens of reason, instead of, because so many people get their news and education and information through these like fake memes and all this BS. And it's like, you got to decipher stuff to figure out what the truth is. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the challenges of the generations coming up is going to have, is being able to decipher through that and look at things with way more reason than we ever had to deal with growing up. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100% makes sense. I'm 52, so the internet was born during my lifetime. So I can remember a time when, if there was photographic evidence of something, it's a matter of, tearing a picture in half and getting rid of the negative or something like that.
Right.
I happened to be a major goody two-shoes in high school, so there's none of that for me. But had there been, there still would have been like a concern, but much lower level. Now that something is, the minute you hit post, that's it. It's everywhere.
All right.
And,
right.
It can be so even misconstrued. Like, somebody recently lost their job because I think they were trying to be ironic in some comment that they made, and somebody took it out of context and made it look like he was being anti-Semitic. And it's like, and you said we're going to need reason. We're going to need critical thinking in the future. Our kids and our grandkids, as they're viewing, past behaviors of their parents and their grandparents, stuff like that. Are we even teaching that anymore? How to learn, how to think. I think the younger generation are being just taught what to think rather than how to come to their own conclusion. And that's a very, very dangerous path.
Yes, and I talk about that. That's another thing in the book too that I talk about a lot is you got to be mentally tough enough to be able to be your own thinker. Don't let other people's opinions form your own. Be able to take it in, digest it, and then come up with your own conclusion. Because I feel like a lot of times, especially now with so much information being thrown at us, we just regurgitate so much stuff. I will sit down with some conservative friends and start listening to the conversation, and I'm like, Ben Shapiro just said that, like that verbatim, like that's not your thought. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, there's a difference between, plagiarism and influence. And so, and I hear it all the time. And so, yeah, it's just because it's on both sides.
It is.
And it's hard not to, like going back to Shapiro, he's a brilliant dude. And he says a lot of things that make a lot of sense. You think, man, that's the way he words it is like, man, that really makes sense. So then you want to steal it and use it too. But so it's hard not to sometimes. But yeah, I think that's certainly going to be a new challenge for parents moving forward, and dealing with these teenagers that are seeing these false narratives, and they make it so easy to jump on board whenever it's like, we gotta get rid of police brutality. Like, well, yeah, obviously police don't like police brutality. Like, obviously, yeah, nobody wants that. But you got to be able to get into it a little more to see what the rate of police brutality really is, to see how significant of a problem that it is. And
there we go with the gun. There we go with the gun thing parallel again.
Absolutely, and like the red flag gun laws, like they'll say, hey, we don't need these people with mental health issues and violent tendencies having guns. Well, yeah, I think a lot of people would just agree on that. Like, I don't want this guy who is, killing squirrels as a child, and now all of a sudden he's wanting to do a mass shooting. Yeah, he doesn't need an arsenal of guns. I think that's
now, unless he was hunting and eating those squirrels, which I know some people do. I personally haven't, but
true that. That is true. I have a lot of hunting friends. That's the good clarification. There is a purpose for a lot of hunting, and that's a whole other.
Oh, Adam froze.
But that's true. But I think, sorry. And, but instead people just take that on its surface and they don't dive down into it to figure out, well, there's lots of ways to abuse this. There's, that's going to affect all innocent people, that they're going to take away my means to protect myself and my family. And so it's just figuring out how to make people dig deeper into issues instead of taking just what's on the surface and what's easy to spit out is going to be a challenge, not only now, but just moving forward. Because it's easy. People take the easiest path. So it's easy just to say, to spew off something without really thinking about the logic behind it. If that makes sense.
Oh, 100% sense. There are several more things I do want to talk with you about, but we are about at our hour. So
I'll quit rambling on. You can edit all this out if you want to. It's okay.
Not at all. I'm loving the conversation, and we'll just have to have you back on again and talk about the things that we had to skip over. But I definitely wanted to touch on this last thing before we start wrapping up. You had said leadership should come from a place of servitude, not authority. And that, when you talk about, you have to kind of stop and think about the layers in something, or the ramifications of a phrase or a word, that right there that's a whole meal. So can you kind of break some of that down for us?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of people, especially in the police world and anywhere really with any kind of rank, they see that rank as levels of success in a lot of ways. And people will go for these positions for more ego-driven, narcissistic type tendencies than maybe they will through a lens of, I have a bigger platform to help more people. I think that because I've seen so many people in leadership positions that they waited until they were in that position of authority to become a leader. But if you start walking the walk beforehand, and you're going through your day-to-day stuff, looking at yourself as that leader already, because once you put on a uniform and a badge, you're a leader. Whether it's if you're a patrolman in the community, whenever you get to a scene, you're the person, right? And so before you're ever given that authority, if you lead from a place of servitude where you are coming to work and you care more about helping that person get to a position that they want to get to before you want to put yourself in a position, that has so much more influence on that individual than just having the authority over that individual. Because I've had people without rank ask me to do something, consider it done. I've had people with authority tell me to do something, but it's coming from a place of authority and not a place of, well, I know this person wants what's best for me. Yeah. And so I think about that, and I try to mimic that in my own life, because it all really comes down to influence. If you're coming from a place of servitude where, hey, I honestly want what's best for Cheryl. I want her to tell me what her goals are, and I'm going to do my best as her supervisor, friend, leader to help her achieve those goals. Then it's going to have much more influence on you and you moving forward and how you respond to stuff later on, instead of me coming to you as authority thinking, how can Cheryl help me get to another position of power? What can I do to make myself look good and to a position of power? Now I'm just going to tell her what to go do that I think will help me achieve that goal. And I think whenever when you start really stepping back and looking at it through that, hey, I'm here to help people. I'm here to serve everybody. And really, a chief of police at any size department, that should be the biggest server of everybody. He should be, they're the face of the agency, but he should be there for his people. And when you get these leaders that are just there because they want to be that face, they want to be narcissistic, they just like having that authority, and they're there for the wrong reasons, you see a lot of leadership flaws, and you see a lot of low morale police departments.
So true. And one of the things is when you approach any job you do in an other focused is what you're talking about, right? Yes. What can I do to help Adam? Well, now you trust me more. So when I give you a command or I give you a suggestion, you trust that it is what's good for Adam, rather than where it's that self-focused, that authoritative. When I tell Adam to do something, it's in order to make me look better or help my career possibly, right? Or it's something I just didn't want to do, so I'm going to, poop rolls downhill. I'm going to let it roll down on Adam.
It absolutely it does. And so it's all about influence. I think back at supervisors I've had, and I think, man, how would they handle this? What would they do? And I think about some supervisors, and I'm just thinking, I will never, ever be like that person. They were just there for the wrong reasons. They didn't give a dang about me or anybody else. They were just there for them. And it's just a bad place to be in.
And then for the younger folks who maybe hear the word service, right, or use the word servitude, maybe that's the word that goes in their ear, but what it sounds like in their mind is subservient. And then they bristle against that. Can you try to make a distinction between those two things?
We're not going to be everybody's stepping stone, but I really believe that because we work for the people. Whether people want to say, people tell us all the time, I pay your paycheck, and we're just kind of roll our eyes. But in reality, they do. And they do pay. And so, the police we are the purveyors of truth and justice. We're the good guys. If you're not willing to if you're not willing to take on that thick skin and understand that we're here for the citizens of the community that we serve and work for.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's hard for people to take in.
Mm-hmm.
But until you start realizing that, you're going to have a harder time than you normally would. The criminal justice system is that pillar of society that upholds the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Like without us, we're going to have a hard time at keeping America and having a society. And so and when you take a step back and you realize the importance of that, and that people's lives and their opinions about our job depend on kind of how their interaction with you, it's more meaningful now than it has ever been, because if somebody has a bad interaction with a cop, it kind of solidifies all that negativity they hear on social media and in the news. And that's it. Yeah. That's just how cops are. And those levels of influence, they're going to tell somebody. And, now you got just more negativity. And so having that servanthood, being customer service friendly, there's times that you got to go hands-on and handle business. That's part of it. Sure. But for the most part, you got to have that mindset that we're here for the people, and that they do pay our salary, mm-hmm. and come from a place of servanthood instead of a place of, I just want to drive fast cars and shoot guns.
Yeah, which both of those things are really
very fun.
They're fun, but they're a teeny itty bitty part of what anybody who wears a uniform and a badge actually ends up getting to do. But
exactly,
I can't stop from drawing those parallels to when I hear you talk about how people are viewing police and how they're viewing firearms owners. That there's a lot of similarities, and so even people listening that are kind of like, well, the cops are too big for their britches, and they have all this military equipment, and whatever all they might be thinking, it's like, but do you, as a firearms owner or a 2A advocate, do you want to be slathered with what a tiny fraction of people do incorrectly with our firearms? No, you don't. So keep it in perspective when you're trying to slather all people in law enforcement with the examples of, sometimes, like you're saying about Ferguson, sometimes narratives that have been proven, not by me, not by Adam, but by the investigators, after the horse left the barn, but have been proven that that's not even true. And yet you're still slathering law enforcement with that big brush, rather than seeing them as individuals who are trying to, really serve their community with the skills that they have. And that happens to be their skill set that drove them to that career. Just don't make it harder on ourselves and each other. Yeah. Really, I guess, is kind of the wrap up for that.
Sure.
But Adam, thank you so much for all the time you've spent with us today. I am definitely going to have you back on, because I've got some really interesting things I want to dive into with you in the future.
I'd love to.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry if I rambled too much.
You did not. It's just there was just way too many cool things to talk about. So I'm sitting here trying to cherry pick on my list here, and it's like, but that one's so good. I don't want to get off the call without doing that one. But just as we go out today, please tell folks how they can follow you, the work that you do, how they can get your book, how they can stay connected with you.
So the book is on Amazon in all formats, be it ebook, Audible, if you want to hear my voice, for a few hours, paperback and hardback. I think Target and Walmart are carrying the paperbacks. You can find a link to all that stuff on my website, adamlwilson.com. My Instagram handle is AdamWilson02. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn. I have an app out there. It's a Sergeant Exam app. You can find that in the for Android and on Apple in the iTunes store. And and just follow my YouTube channel, Tip of the Spear with Adam Wilson. Brand new channel, and still kind of figuring out the direction that we're wanting to go, but having a lot of fun with that. Not writing as much because I've been enjoying the conversation more. And so, but yeah, so that's my things. Amazon, AdamLWilson.com, social media links, and then the Tip of the Spear with Adam Wilson.
Well, I highly recommend Tip of the Spear on YouTube because I got to be a guest of Adam's.
This is true.
So that was a fun conversation. Really, we talk about a guest that rambles. You probably were wishing you had a zapper somehow.
I thought you were great.
Wrap it up already. Anyway, thank you again so much for everything. Such a cool conversation, an interesting conversation today about resourcefulness and resilience and, not letting our past determine our future. And I just really appreciate you and thank you for your service.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Well, stick around. There's always lots more coming up on Gun Freedom Radio.